Shalom and happy Monday to you. This is Chris Wilson with Torah and Messiah, our podcast series. We're on episode number 4, and just reminding you that the point of the podcast is to bring you historical information pertaining to the scriptures and the Bible, its background, the manners and customs of which pertain to anything relating to the Bible, and also just, interesting articles that I come across to get your mind to think, to kind of think in a manner that's outside of the box, to challenge us, because we're all here to learn and grow, and by means of us being iron to sharpen one another as brothers and sisters of the belief. And I do want to state as a disclaimer, if there are things I do read, just because I read them here on this channel doesn't necessarily mean that I agree with everything I read. I'm just reading the information as so for you, the viewer or listener, so you can have some more information at your fingertips that you can utilize in your own personal study. Because there may be many truths or maybe many topics that you have yet to cover or even dig into or haven't heard in a manner taught. So, getting back to Principle of the Seed by Brad Scott, Chapter 1, let's begin. Chapter 1, Eating from the Tree of the Knowledge of Good and Evil. No one needs to look very far or very hard to see the moral, ethical, and social decline of our once great nation. Turn on the TV and notice the subjects of the first 15 minutes of every broadcast, or take a look at the first 3 pages of most newspapers. Moral and ethical scandals of every conceivable variety are plaguing our nation. Every other week or so, another powerful politician is in the middle of a political scam, especially when there is money involved. The more technologically advanced we become, the greater the ingenuity and complexity of our criminal possibilities. Not only are the traditional immoral activities skyrocketing, but our imagination has run amok in all the possible combinations of insidious behavior. Most of us can live with this as long as it is not happening in our neighborhood. However, historically, plunging morals and values have preceded the fall of every great nation that once dominated the earth. These are not insignificant times. Many of our young people today have grown up in a world in which the great nation to the north of Israel is Russia. For those of us old enough to receive AARP cards in the mail, that area was called the Soviet Union. From Nikita Khrushchev in the 1950s to Mikhail Gorbachev in the 80s, there has been a consistent tone to many of their speeches and writings concerning the United States. The presentations may be different, but the bottom line was consistent. The United States of America is going to fall. America will collapse. We will not send a single missile or a single soldier. She will implode because of her immorality. Americans have been polled quite often concerning their faith. USA Today has polled us. The New York Times, the Zogby, the Washington Post, and even the Christian pollster George Barna have questioned us concerning our faith. Every one of these polls has drawn very similar conclusions and very close statistics concerning America's faith. America has fairly consistently claimed to be Christian and has generally our 90th percentile in our confession of some form of Christianity. In other words, close to 9 out of every 10 people on the street claim to embrace some brand of Christian faith. Now, why would a nation that is 90% Christian collapse because of their immorality? And how dare you tell us, Mr. Communist, that America, the land that has God on its dollar bills, is going to go down because of our immorality? The next time you have an opportunity to read through a modern almanac, you will notice that America leads the world in several interesting categories. America leads the world in the distribution and consumption of pornography. She is number 1 in illegal drug consumption. This we could have guessed, but the more startling statistic is that we lead the world in legal drug consumption as well. This is far more insidious than illegal drug consumption. Why is that? Because many of us unconsciously and consciously assume that if it is legal, it must be all right. As I speak, many of us are caught on a hamster wheel. Our multitude of ailments is rectified by consuming a myriad of legal drugs, and this myriad of legal drugs has become the dominant source of our ailments. I'm going to suggest that our healthcare system and our health are out of control. With that in mind, we also lead the world in disease. Not all deadly diseases, although that would be included, but rather your everyday run-of-the-mill diseases we have all learned to accept as part of life. We are number one in the world in health costs and health care. We come in first in the world in psychological treatment, drug treatment, mental hospitals, Valium, and Prozac. We lead the world in suicide, particularly our young people under the age of 18. We are always one of the leaders of the world in murder. Not mass murder, but just killing ourselves off one at a time. We are number one in the world in sex crimes, and we lead the world in churches, seminaries, revivals, missionaries, gospel groups, Christian rock stars, and purpose-driven congregations. What is wrong with this photo? Remember that statistic wherein America confesses to be 90% Christian? Well, the dominant religion in this country, in concert with the media, would have us all believe that the reason we lead the world in these immoral activities is because of the 10%. In other words, these people would have us believe that the tail is wagging the dog here, that the immoral 10% are controlling the moral 90%. The dominant religion in America would identify for us who the 10% are. They would be the atheists, the agnostics, the homosexuals, the Democrats if you're a Republican, and the Republicans if you're a Democrat. They would include the liberal media and Hollywood, of course. Many would lay the blame entirely on the Clintons, or perhaps a few on sports and beer commercials. But never, never, never would the faithful 90% be involved. After all, judgment does not begin in the house of Yahweh, right? I am going to suggest something that may shock many. I am going to suggest that the reason our once great country leads the world in these immoral categories is because we indeed are 90% Christian. Yes, that is what I said, but bear with me. Here is what we are not. We are not 90% God-fearing, Bible-believing, obedient followers of a Jewish Messiah. We are, however, dominantly Christian. We have done a wonderful job proliferating Christian doctrine and reproducing more Christians. But are we teaching the Scriptures? All of the Scriptures? Or are we teaching and spreading Christianity? Is it the Scriptures that we are living by, or is it the message of the products of our great seminaries and the early church fathers that we are reproducing? In keeping with a just weight, I must add that while we lead the world in all this immoral, evil behavior, our nation has done much good as well. We are usually one of the first nations to send medical supplies, food, and money to nations hit by disasters. We conquer nations that are at war with us and then go back and play a major part in restoring that same nation. We do good at one turn and evil at another. Which tree do you think that America is eating from? Could it be possible, especially in these last days, that judgment really does begin in the house of Yahweh? And should the house of Yahweh rise up and take responsibility for restoring the laws of Yahweh, Elohim, back to this great nation? As a former pastor, if one can be such a thing, I followed the Christian line. I believed, taught, and behaved in the usual cookie-cutter manner. I towed the line of dispensational thinking. My sermons were filled with 3 good points followed by a poem. I closed in the usual manner by presenting an altar call, as Seinfeld would say, quote, "Not that there is anything wrong with that," end quote. Now and then there would be someone who was moved by what I had to say and would somewhat come reluctantly up to the front of the sanctuary. Of course, he did not know what to say or how to accept Christ into his life, so I had to, for all intents and purposes, do it for him. We all know how that goes. When we come to the church, we all plant ourselves in our usual spots. The service begins with the praise team singing for us, and then the pastor prays for us, followed by a sermon which the pastor has prepared by studying for us. The pastor prays for us again, and then we saunter up front to, quote, get saved. How must we speak for us so Yahweh hears the right words? True to course, I would then tell this new convert that he should go home and read his scriptures now, starting in the book of John. That's right, John. How many of you come home after purchasing a good book, sit down in your favorite chair, open up the book, and start reading 3/4 of the way into the book? We do that with one particular book, however. I have a new suggestion for those who have recently received the Messiah. Go home, read your scriptures, and start in the beginning. That way, when you get to the end, you will know who everybody is. You will know the plot and the characters, and you will have a substantially grounded view of the author. I have found that even though my passion and my dedication lie in teaching and understanding this beautiful God-ordained language called Hebrew, the problem in America is not a lack of Hebrew. According to Mr. Barna's polls, once again, most Americans do not know what their scriptures say in English, much less in Greek or Hebrew. Most Americans, according to Mr. Barna, are familiar with many of the stories contained in the Tanakh, that is the Old Testament, but a large majority could not immediately recall who came first, Moses or Abraham. A large majority of Christian adults could not place in which books many of the stories in the Old Testament, that is the Tanakh, were located. There was a significant group of people who were unfamiliar with the names of many books in the Tanakh. Could some of this be attributed to the fact that we start many believers in the book of John? Could some of this be traced to a dominant religious system that generally ignores the Old Testament because, after all, Christ died to end all of that? It is this author's opinion that there is a direct relationship between our ignorance and rejection of Yahweh's laws and commandments and our leading role in immoral behavior. Well, thanks for listening, everyone, and that was Chapter 1 of Principle of the Seed, Eating from the Tree of Knowledge of Good and Evil. I hope that you enjoyed the podcast, and if you know anyone that would benefit from this, please share them the link, and I will provide a link down in the description below where you can place a donation to receive this book for yourself. It is available for purchase of hard copy, or for a small donation you can get it in ebook format that you can download readily on your Kindle, your tablet, or your telephone. In the meantime, folks, I appreciate you tuning in, and stay tuned till tomorrow when we will get into Chapter 2, and that is titled Hebrew Thinking and Greek Thinking. And just as a short teaser, here's how Chapter 2 starts. Before drifting too far into our subject, it is imperative that we take a cursory view of the difference between Hebrew, which is scriptural thinking, and Greek, which is Western thinking. There is a very long historical background to the thought process that our culture practices. All right, I'm going to stop right there. In the meantime, folks, Yahweh bless you and keep you. May you have a wonderful day. Hope you've had a blessed Monday. I hope that the start of your Tuesday is going to be just as blessed. And stay tuned. Let me know in the comment section below if there's any books or any topics or anything that you would like to have read, researched, looked into. I will do my best to put together something to share my perspective and the abundance of truth that I uncover. Right now I am working on a teaching of when a day begins. I did recently put out a couple videos on the writings of Voy Wilkes, and one was titled, When Does a Day Begin? And I got a lot of comments and feedback off that one video, and so it spurred me to dig further deeper into that topic, and I've uncovered a lot of interesting points that I would like to share with you in the upcoming weeks. And if there's a particular word that you would like me to study back into the Hebrew or into the Greek, please leave that down in the comments below. Right now I'm taking this time off from the Wednesday word studies to narrate you books and articles, so that way I myself can have time to study for certain words and teachings to put together to have for you, the viewer or listener, to enjoy. But in the meantime, I thank you again, and Yahweh bless. Shalom.
For your sake, Israel, he will do all these things. Hope in Yahweh. Oh, Israel, hope in Yahweh.